Good start. There it is. All right. Thank you, sir or ma'am. This is Lee again. Today, some of you are like, oh my gosh, is this going to be week number 8 talking about money and finances? The answer, no. So some of you always got a nice 30-minute nap during those leadership calls because you're like, I don't even care. But you will. So I will mention money at some point. So if you're taking notes, I would entitle this little session, When the Problem Isn't the Problem. When the problem isn't the problem, because we're going to talk about problems this morning or tonight or midday if you're in Canada. So here's my thesis. I want to start off with the main idea. So in case you do get sleepy, you'll at least have one thing written down, and that's this. Big problems are the result of neglecting small ones. Big problems in your life are the result of neglecting small ones. So I want you to start off, I want you to take 30 seconds and write down on your notes, if you're a note taker, write down 1 or 2, maybe 3 small things you need to do or you need to attend to that you have been neglecting. Okay? Write down a couple things that you need to pay attention to because you've put them off, you've procrastinated. In other words, right now, they're small problems. Think about that for a minute. What are some small problems that I know I should need to take care of, but I haven't really paid attention to? All right, so we'll save those for a few minutes. Make sure everybody's got a couple, because that will lend itself to a good discussion if you guys discuss these after we hang up. So, interesting book I'm familiar with by a guy named Jim Moorhead. Jim Moorhead wrote a book called The Instant Survivor, and he says this: how often have we learned the harsh lesson that like unharvested fruit, untended problems turn rotten? I mean, think about that. If you've ever bought fruit or grown fruit and you don't harvest it or take care of it or eat it quickly enough, it gets overripe and turns to big problems. It's rotten. So when big problems become crises, that's when they're no longer tiny little problems. All right, and I have numerous examples. I'm going to go through some of these. I alluded to my sister-in-law who over the years has neglected to pay her credit card bills. That was a small problem when you have a credit card and you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to really pay this, or oh my gosh, I haven't done this, or oops, a little late fee, no big deal. Well, now that snowballs. That's a big problem. Some of you are familiar with, I hope it's not you, but parents who've neglected their children growing up. They've been so busy doing their career. Woo, go, go, go. I'll take care of my kids later. I'll pay attention to them sometime. And then they grow up and the kids are angry as teenagers. And they've got, okay, well, I'll take my daughter out for a nice long weekend and I'll make up for all that lost time. I'll start off with a small inattention on my part, and now has grown to a relationship issue. You may know people like that. My son has, when he moved to this city and from a different part of the U.S., he never changed his car tags, his license on the back of his car. So now they're expired, and I have, as a dutiful father, reminded him of this repeatedly, like, you really need to get those tags changed, or the police, the popo, will stop you. And the longer he waits, the bigger the fine. So that's a little problem that he should have taken care of, but he neglected it. And now it will be a big one. So enjoy. So very few big problems start as big problems. In fact, most problems, if you think about it, they start small. But when you neglect them and they just sit, they become big. So a lot of these big problems that you've got in your life, also I've noticed, are easily addressed if you nip them in the bud, if you take care of them early. But by not addressing them, you sort of allowed them to grow, which is not what we want. And a lot of times you're creating self-inflicted time management problems. We will talk about time management in another series, when you let the little things grow into bigger ones. So those are self-inflicted wounds. So if you're thinking, well, gosh, let me think about small problems that can become big ones. Let me give you a few here that I thought of. One, cleaning up. Just cleaning up. That one thing you just sat on your desk, and then add that to the afternoon you left without cleaning your sticky notes off your laptop in your work area and all the papers you didn't put away, and soon you're just swimming in piles of stuff, right? I'm going to talk about email in a minute because you're like, I don't have a lot of paper on my desk. Well, okay, you have digital cleanup to do. I know that. So cleaning up is not a huge deal, but when it starts to overwhelm you because you haven't tended to it, it's like wearing all your clothes and never washing them. At first, it's no big deal. Hey, I've got plenty of underwear. But then guess what? If you haven't washed them in 2 weeks, it is a crisis. I hope it is. If you're wearing the same underwear you wore 2 weeks ago without washing it, that is a crisis. And just write that down if you're doing that, okay? Because your office mates have noticed. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about paying bills. You know, you let that one bill sit, you forgot about it, and now it's overdue. Maybe now you've got to pay a late fee. So ultimately, leaving that alone can affect your credit rating, okay? Because even bigger problems come to pass. Let's talk about number 3. I've got organization. You know, thank goodness for the order porter that's coming into being. If you're a clothier, you know, remember, you didn't upload your orders. You didn't send them in. Now you're trying to complete something urgent, and you just get disorganized. It's not good. And your problem gets compounded. Some of you have read the compound effect. Well, that happens with problems too. It's not just with good things. All right, let's talk about email. This is another little category. You let your emails pile up. Maybe you're using your inbox as your to-do list. I knew a guy I worked with that his inbox was, he never cleaned it out. He never deleted a thing. And I was like, what are you doing? He goes, well, this is just kind of my running to-do list. And he had 8,000 emails in his inbox. So he would just scroll and scroll and scroll. And I'm just like, Jeff, put those in folders, throw something away. He's like, well, you know, it was a big mess. But it didn't start as a big mess. It was just a bad habit of not being organized, and his problem was compounded. Okay, so you know, you can do that if you don't pay attention to your emails and put them in a folder or flag them somehow. It just turns into a mess of unanswered and unreplied to messages, and some of your clients don't really like that, right? Which leads to another category of little problems, and that's relationships. Ooh, now this one hurts a little bit. Relationships, small relationship problems become big ones when you don't address them. Like you can have a tiny misunderstanding, and then a grudge will grow out of that. Like a misunderstanding in two people's minds, those become mistruths, and then accusations. And what could have been addressed early on with kind of a friendly, maybe an awkward conversation, turns into an adversarial situation. Well, I don't even like her anymore, okay? And it all came from a misunderstanding that started tiny back here and then sort of expanded over time. Have you guys ever experienced that? Yeah? Okay. Well, the Bulgarians haven't, and everyone else has muted their video. So I'm sure many of you are raising your hand and nodding your head going, yes. And I know you have relationship problems with people. You address it early. It's so much easier when you address a small problem early than when it becomes big. Because a lot of us don't like to deal with conflict. So we just, you know, if there's an issue, we just take it. Here's the carpet. We just sweep it under the rug. There it goes. Okay, I can't see it. It's gone. It'll just take care of itself. Wrong. Wrong. All right. Final category, and we'll start addressing how to deal with this. The other thing I thought of was deadlines. Just deadlines, you know, small assignments, things you've got to do at work or at home are easy till you run up against a deadline. Like I know some of you I talk to are in school. So when you've got a deadline for a paper or something that's due, suddenly something that was small has become a crisis at the 11th hour because you waited till the last minute And then you don't have all the materials, you don't have the information to complete that. So those cause pain in our lives. And what causes these little problems to get big? Let's address that. All right. So this is another little section if you're taking notes. And that's first thing is delay. So write this down. Delay, not problems, destroys us. Delay is what destroys us, not problems. Okay? Your crises in your life right now typically, usually started just at a small problem way back. And this, you know what? I am going to talk about money for a minute. This applies to saving money. Not saving money when you're 25 is not a crisis now. It will be a crisis later. Okay? Believe me. I've talked to a number of you that I coach, and they're like, you say stuff like, oh yeah, I'm kind of thinking about starting to save a little money each check, or it sounds like this. I'm starting to begin to ponder, to think about maybe doing it next week. Okay? That means I'm not doing it. It's not a big deal. There's no pain involved. It's a tiny little issue in my life. Guess what? When you're 40 and you want to buy a home, it will be a problem. All right? So I'm going to send you a link. This is like one of my last chances. I'm going to send you a link to a budget, some budget examples, some samples, so you can set up your own little budget and you can start saving money or have that automatically taken out of your check and put in your bank. So anyway, just to drive this home, I was in a McDonald's the other day. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a McDonald's, but there are workers that are making hamburgers and filet of fish sandwiches and things like that. And I noticed in this particular McDonald's, almost everyone that worked behind the counter was, I would say, 65 at least or 70 years old. They were all senior citizens. Okay, were they working at McDonald's because they were developing their CV? No, they were not developing their resumes. They weren't there because, like, I really need some more work experience. I'm 70. No, they were working there because they had to, which is, to me, is kind of sad. And, you know, if you're working in a like here in the US where there's all kinds of opportunity to make money and they needed to work at that age, that is a sad thing. To me, that's a crisis. So if you take steps now and you don't delay to start putting money aside and making sure you're out of debt, see my previous leadership call on that, then that delay won't hurt you. Okay? So for those of you in Manila, that, you know, in the Davao office, you're like, hey, what about us? Reference us. Okay. There was General Douglas MacArthur, who was the, you know, if you do your World War II history lesson, but he was very involved with the Philippine operation. And he said the history of the failure of war can be summed up in 2 words: too late. Too late. And here's what he meant. Too late in comprehending the deadly purpose of a potential enemy that's going to attack you. Too late in realizing that your army is in mortal danger. Too late in being prepared. Too late to gather all the potential forces to defend the nation. So, you know, delaying starting to save money can also destroy your freedom later on. Okay? You won't have as many options. All right, so enough on delay. Here's another one. Denial. Denial, okay? Denial is pretending a little problem will go away if we ignore it, okay? That's all it is. Just pretend, oh, this will take care of itself. And any of those things I listed earlier, just like especially relationship problems, don't go away if we just lift the rug, sweep it underneath, and then 2 people who have a little issue just ignore the problem. It grows. I mean, think about it. You're surrounded by crisis every day. There's financial crisis in the markets. There's geopolitical crisis. There's banking crises that are always happening. And the fact that life goes on and it doesn't always impact you at the moment, that gives you the wrong impression. So life kind of goes on when crisis is out there, but personal problems don't magically vanish next week. You have to address them. Health issues, financial little problems, management issues never solve themselves, which leads me to one of my important theories that I'll share with you, and that's the dog poop theory. All right, so write that down. The dog poop theory. How many of you have a little, have you ever had a little puppy for a pet? Is anybody? Thank you for participating, Bulgaria. All right. What a puppy does, if you're like not paying attention to the puppy, then you will leave them alone for a little while, and you hear them and they're running around, and then you walk in and you're accosted by this smell. You're like, oh my gosh, what has happened? Did that dog poop? And you start looking around, and sure enough, right on your nice new area, your throw rug, is a fresh batch of hot steaming poop. And you're like, oh, I've got a problem. So here's your options at this point. One, address the problem, run and get one of those Bounty towels and your dog fresh scent rug cleaner spray, and you run in and you hold your nose and you're like, oh my gosh, here we go. And you scoop it up and you're like, oh, it's warm. And you spray the rug and you deal with it at the moment. Your other option is this. You can say, you know what, that reeks, but I don't feel like picking up dog poop, so I'm gonna go to work. So you come home at the end of the day, and those little logs have turned into this horrible, acrid, deadly, acidic, radioactive area on your rug. And you not only, it still reeks, probably worse, the dogs come and played in it, and then it has stained the rug permanently, and it ruins it. So a little problem taken care of quickly is not fun, but you can deal with it. If you let it sit, it doesn't solve it. It doesn't take care of itself. That, my friends, is the dog poop theory. So enjoy that. All right, a couple more thoughts here, and then I'll see if you have any thoughts for those of you who are participating. Let me just share. Here's a good question. You're like, okay, I know I've got little problems that can become big. What do I do? Here's a question I would ask myself. If things continue as they are, where will I end up? That is a great wake-up question. It gives you illuminating trajectory. You can take action by shining the light on where you're headed. And if nothing changes here for me at LGFG, where will I be in a month, or in a year, or at the next annual, semi-annual meeting? So this guy I was quoting from the book earlier suggests that positive trajectory begins with that question. And he says, number one, you got to move beyond denial. Two, you've got to stop substituting worry for action. I mean, most of us would just like to worry about a problem rather than doing anything about it. Just like, I'm just sit here and worry. Well, why don't you do something? Well, I'd rather just be anxious. Not smart. The third thing the guy suggests is stop telling lies about your situation. You know, most of us make up stories in our head that aren't always true when it comes to problems. And the fourth thing, in terms of ego, you need to accept help from others to help you tackle your problems. Ask someone in your group that can help you with the problem for help. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're smart. We're a lot stronger together than we are independent. Okay? Here's what Chenda shared with me yesterday on our call. And this is what he shared with his team in Hong Kong. He said, we're a lot like, wait, let me back up. Somebody, it was Chenda, had asked, well, what do you do? He goes, now I've got all these little problems that are really important to me, and I know I got to take care of them, but if you take care of the little problems, then something else needs to take its place because you've created a problem because you were taking time. It was all about time. It was a time question because you're just replacing your problems. If I do this and I can't do this, and this falls off the plate, and if I can. So I just gave a short thought on one of my favorite consultants that I have read about. I've read his material. He put out a booklet from the Strategic Coach called, he said there's there was 3 types of time in time management. And if you're an entrepreneur, he says you got 3 types of time. And I can do this on a separate call, but let me just introduce you to the idea. He says there's free time, there's focus time, and there's buffer time. Free time, focus time, buffer time. Now, when you are at work at LGFG, focus time is when you put your head down, you turn off your notifications on the phone, you get off of Facebook, you shut down Instagram, and you just go for it, right? That is focus time. That's when you need to make things happen. A focus day is a day at work when you are creating a nice, full calendar, filling it up with qualified bookings, okay? Focus time. Free time, which you also have to plot into your weekly. We're going to talk about time management in a future call. But if you sit down and you look at your week or you look at your month and say, okay, when am I going to take some free time to rejuvenate and recharge myself or take a holiday? You have to plot in your free time. That's when you do nothing related to work to let your brain detox, okay? And then there's an important other type of time, he says, for entrepreneurs, that's buffer time. And buffer time is a part of a day, or ideally a day, which he calls buffer days, where you take care of all the little crap, all the little problems, all the little stuff, all the returning calls, answering emails, stuff that's just kind of hanging around your head or like buzzing around your head like a gnat. So I was like, oh yeah, I should do that. Well, I'm not. I don't have time. I got to get work done. Sometimes you need to just put the work aside and think, today is buffer. Like this Saturday, I'm going to have a buffer day. And that's the day you just knock out all the little things so that when you do come to work to have a focus day, you can be focused. See, when I used to get messed up working in a corporate office because I wasn't on a super tight schedule as far as making calls and activity points and all that. So since I was sort of in control of my time, I would take care of some of the buffer stuff, and I'd also try to be focused, and I'd close my door, but people would interrupt me. And sometimes I'd go home and I'd say, I don't even know what I got done today. I know I worked, but I have nothing to show. So I decided there were some days that were buffer days, and I was just dedicating that to helping other people on the team, returning your calls, doing emails, catching up on a report, whatever. But I wasn't trying to get focused that day. And then there were other days, like how I do focus days now is I leave my house, I go to the library, I find a little cubicle, I put on headphones, play Baroque music, and then and turn everything off but what I'm working on. And I can get more done in 2 hours than 6 hours here at home, just because there's other stuff happening all the time. Okay? So I may go through that a different time with you guys, the 3 types of time: free time, buffer time, focus time. But if your expectations are set before you engage in any of those 3 types of time, you won't feel guilty because you haven't gotten something done. So more on that later. But that led Chenda to say, that's interesting. And he explained to his team that we at LGFG are like chefs, okay? And when the restaurant is open, that's like focus time. That's when we are serving people that come into the restaurant. But we are not creating recipes and looking up stuff online and experimenting back in the kitchen to think of new dishes. No, that's buffer time. That happens at a different time, maybe way before the restaurant opens. But when the day starts, that's focus time, and we need to be on the phone making calls or sitting down with clients face-to-face. Focus day. So I thought, well, that's a great analogy. I like it. I like that. Okay. So that's my message. Big problems are the result of neglecting small ones. That is the main idea. Now I want you to look at your list as we close and ask yourself, what action will you take today to get that little problem off your list? And as we close, if you hang up and you do have time, if you're not heading home, to have a few minutes to discuss how to tackle these things and still be productive during the workday, that would be a good conversation to have. All right? So, and I will send you a little link to Dave Ramsey's budget forms, because some of you are like, I don't even know what to do with the budget. I will help you for the last time. And ask yourself, if I continue right now as I am saving money, Where will I end up? Good question. All right, let me open the lines. You can unmute yourself and share a thought, or maybe share an example of a little problem that turned into a big one because you let it go too long. Anyone? My work is done. Okay. Fine. Yes.
Yeah, I got a question.
Do it.
Okay. So let's say like you are like investing, say you have a mortgage, this and that, but it's like taking up pretty much all your funds, right? So you could be, investing into other things, or, even renting, but living in a different area. So where is that long-term thinking? Like, because in a sense too, like if you just think about, pensions, investment, but you also sacrifice the here and now, and the future's not guaranteed. So where do you draw that line? It's like, how do you know you're doing the right thing if you're putting all your money into a mortgage, where you could be putting it into something else?
Well, who has another hour to talk? That's a huge question. So I am going to answer it by saying you need to. That is wow. Having a mortgage means you own a home, you own property, which hopefully will appreciate, and you can resell it someday. So that is a good thing. If you're just paying rent, that's money just thrown to the wind. So I would say if you've taken the step of you own a property, then that's a good thing. And I would stick with it and not look at that as an expense. Mm-hmm. I would say as much as possible, I would, the future's never guaranteed. But if we look back over the last 80 or 90 years, at least at the stock exchange here in the U.S., there's been at least, I think it was a 9.8% return. So even though there've been these crashes, the market always comes back. So I always have an optimistic look at investments in the future. I know the problem with most people is they put away some money, and then the stocks tank, or the market tanks, or their money market fund starts to dip because of a recession, and everyone panics. So they start selling, sell, and which makes everything worse. But then when they get back in the market, they've lost tons. So when I invest, if this is kind of an investment question, I go for the long haul. But you have to choose the level of financial risk and pressure you're willing to undertake when you're in your 20s. I always was conservative with my money, and I put it in vehicles that weren't really, I put them in things that would yield a higher return, but I kept some out in my portfolio to be a hedge against volatility in the market. I think I've said every financial word that I know. So what I would do is, seriously, like I recommended, I would sit down and find a financial advisor that you trust, that has a good reputation, and ask good, hard questions about that. Because usually what they ask you is, they say, where's all your money? Where have you put it? How much do you owe? How much have you saved? And where's that invested? And then they sit and go, okay, now how comfortable are you with risk? Because and when you're young and you don't have a partner, you're not married, it's not a big deal to roll the dice on something that's, where you can make a lot of money, but you might lose it all, like I did with $5,000 that I put into gold and silver and coal when I was 23. My director said, if you're willing to lose it all, you can put it here. It's very speculative. And I did, thinking, I'm going to make some big money. So some of it, you just make mistakes and you learn from it and develop judgment. But I would sit down with a financial planner and kind of hash through. That's a good question. Like, how do you know? When do you? And all they can do is give you opinions. Another reason. So that's a semi answer. I'd spend a lot of time praying too.
Yeah, exactly. Because one thing you can't get back is your youth, right? So it's like, you're investing, but you're also taking away from other things that you could, doing for yourself too, right? Let's say even you want monthly budget for, say, coaching, right? But you know you have a mortgage, or even, let's say, proteins and supplements, you want to get ripped. That's also an investment to your health. But you got to draw it from you making compromises all the time. So am I putting into this? It's in 30, 40 years or whatever, I'll be, much older, but I'll be set. Will I even get that far, right? So it's you're always investing versus short versus long term and in different areas of your life.
Yeah. Well, I always tried to go for balance on the short run with my youth, trying to stay fit and do as much as I could afford, and as far as nutrition and stuff like that. But I just look for ways, how can I do this for less? So, and some of you are like, well, I don't know. That's such a broad question, but an important one. It would require more calls.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Coaching, but it was good. It's good to think. Good, you're even thinking about that. That's huge.
Oh yeah.
Most people don't. They're just like, hey, I got some money this week. Let's go. It's gone. Woo!
Yeah, the beer fund, right?
Can't wait till next Friday.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I encourage the long-term thinking. All right. I've gone over. Anybody else? Okay, I guess not. You guys have a fantastic week, and let's continue the uphill climb. Let's do the grind. Let's make it happen. Let's win. Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Woo!
They couldn't stop Jack or the horses happy. Then they could